Hello, students. Welcome back. It's lovely seeing you all again. So, till now in the course, you have covered approximately 50 lectures, right? So, already you have a broad understanding of what sociology of media is all about. In these lectures, like in the previous lectures, we have already given you a lot of theoretical concepts, right? We have already, you have learned these theoretical concepts related to sociology of media. Other than that, we have also had a lot of lectures which taught you, which kind of explained how to apply these theories or how to apply your understandings in the readings of media. At the other end, we also covered a couple of topics which brought research into its ambit, where you actually applied the sociology of media framework and looked at what could be the possible research topics and how to go about it in terms of the method. After covering these topics, I thought it would be appropriate to give you a few more lectures which will clear your understanding with regard to application. Because as we all know, in today's date, the application of the theoretical framework or the application of your understanding is much more important rather than simply learning the theories or simply knowing about the theoretical frameworks. So, with this regard, I was thinking on what I went ahead and in preparing these lectures is I looked at the content in the popular culture, right? The content around us, the media content all around us, and tried to and in this particular lecture, I'm trying to help you to find out in a little more elaborate details of how to read these texts. Now, as you know, that my personal expertise is in the field of cinema. So I'm starting with cinema. However, since these are like almost like revision lessons pertaining to the application of the concepts, I will also go into newspaper, a web series, which I'm sure you will find very interesting. I would also go back into advertisements and so on. But let's begin with films, right? And let's see that how all this understanding of sociological framework, with sociology of media framework, which we have understood, which we have gathered, how do we now use in order to analyze a film? But I think that's necessary because many of you will pursue your masters in per se film courses, right? Or even in other, say, sociology courses as well. There, writing an assignment on understanding a film, right? Or analyzing a film or connecting as a film as a unit of popular culture to the sociological framework is very, very common. It kind of gives you a broad understanding of how you connect a text, right? Now, in this scenario, it's not a piece of literature, it's not poetry, it's a film, but how you connect this piece of text to the larger sociological framework. So, with that mindset, let's go ahead. And I have named this topic as film criticism. That is, film criticism, or rather, a subheading would be how to go about in analyzing a film or how to analyze a film. And here I present my lecture to you. Now, first of all, is writing the film analysis essay, right? I am sure even right now, students who are pursuing in UG level, it's very, very common, right? That in the undergraduate level, writing an essay on any one particular film, or how does it connect to politics or culture and so on, or how does it connect to the larger sociological framework, is a very common assignment which I'm sure many of your teachers give, right? So these two lectures is to help you understand that how you go about writing this. When somebody gives you an assignment that write an essay on so and so film, how do you go about writing it? Now, a common mistake with students too, right, is whenever somebody asks students to analyze a film, they rather analyze it in terms of how good the editing is, how good the camera work is, right, how good the shot taking is, and so on. Of course, you need to analyze a film, and then you can very well analyze a film with regard to its technical capabilities. But is a film only about techniques? Is it so? right? In that case, you would not have been sitting in this course. Rather, I mean, filmmaking, or rather anything to do with a film, would have only be something to do with a bunch of technicians. But that's not the scenario, right? Filmmaking is much more than simply a technique, right? It is also connected to a lot of other, and that's why it's considered an art form. That's why we study films. That's the reason why there's a subject called film studies, because if that would not have been the case, then simply there would have been, a film could have been judged in terms of its technical capabilities. But that is not so. We all know that, right? And that's why we study film studies, right? Just like we study literature, just like we study any other, just like we study painting or poetry, we study cinema. We study cinema as a piece of art, right? It's an art, and we study that art. And why is that so? Because cinema as a medium, we do not consider it simply an amalgamation of editing and camera and sound and script writing and so on, which are definitely very important, which are the technical features of a film, right, related to technique, making of the film. But other than the making of the film, there's a huge ambit of cinema studies, where you study cinema as an art form per se. And this is why this brings me to today's lecture, where we look at films, right? Of course, you had a lecture earlier, I remember, which is on sociology of film. So where you studied kind of couple of films with regard to sociological framework. But I think this particular lecture is much more focused on the application of that, right? It's one thing to know how to analyze a film, and it's another thing to know how to go about and write it per se as well. So writing a film analysis requires you to consider the composition of the film. I'm reading a bit from the text, from the PPT, the individual parts and the choices made that come together to create the finished piece. Film analysis goes beyond the analysis of the film as literature, right? So just now I was explaining that it's similar to literature, it's similar to poetry, it's similar to painting, right? It does include camera angles, lighting, set design, sound, but that's not the only thing when you analyze a film. That was the point. So the first thing when somebody asks you to analyze a film is that you watch the film. Right? And you watch the film not once, but you watch the film twice and thrice. The idea is that you need to generate a critical eye, right? And when students ask me, ma'am, how do we generate that critical eye? The only answer to this is you read and, you are well read. Right? So the more well-read you are, the more aware you are of the world around us, the more you can have a critical eye. So this is not something which you can do in one day, right? A critical eye is not something which you can, inculcate within yourself in a day or two. It's something which is there inside you, right? So the next thing, once you have seen the film with that critical eye, which I was talking about, the well-read, well-thought, critical eye, then you consider why you have been assigned to watch a film. As a particular professor or whosoever has asked you to analyze a film, I mean, there's a reason to that the person has said that, right? So if that person has said purely because he wants you to write a promotional piece of the film, that's a different thing altogether. We'll talk about film review in the following lectures. But the idea definitely when a teacher gives you is not because she or he wants you to promote the film, right? The idea is whether you can study that film as a piece of text, just like literature, just like painting, and then connect it to a larger theoretical framework. Right? So then you please focus on why you have been assigned a particular film. See and find that connect, right, of why that particular professor has given you this assignment. What are you looking for in connection to the content? Sometimes it happens, say, a professor in the class is teaching about class. Right? Class, in the sense class is a concept, and then that particular professor is showing you a film which kind of particularly deals with the idea of class conflict. Right? So say suppose the professor has shown you a film like, which we will discuss further in the lecture, a film like Parasite. So Parasite is a wonderful film when anybody wants to talk about class conflict. right? So I mean, it's that easy to kind of understand class conflict with the aid of the film. So definitely, when a professor has given you a film like Parasite to analyze, and overarchingly, if the professor is talking about class, then you are supposed to analyze the film with the lens of the class, right? So you have to find that connect, right? Why have you been asked to analyze that particular film and not any other film? But once you have you have received your film, right? You give undivided attention to the film. Pay attention, close attention to the details, and make observations that might just lead to bigger question. What do I mean by bigger question? This is the bigger question. Say class is the bigger question. Say racism is the bigger question. say. Gender gap is the bigger question. So, what is the bigger question which the film connects to? Say, women empowerment is the bigger question. So, what is that bigger question which the film is kind of connecting to? Right? Watch the clip the second time. For this viewing, you will want to focus specifically on those elements of the film analysis that your class is focused on. Right? So once you have figured out, okay, so I'm watching this film, I'm getting a hunch that this is connected to racism. So then you, of course, read up about racism, right? You have to be well read. Remember, critical eye is all about how well read you are. Without reading, if you don't know your history, if you don't know particularly history, then I don't think so you'll be able to analyze a film, just like you can't analyze anything if you don't know the overarching where the film is coming from, right? So of course you need that critical eye, but with that critical eye, when you watch the film for the second time, now that you know that bigger question which you are trying to connect the film to, then you look at this particular film or a clip or a shot, whatever has been given to you, with that perspective. Please take notes while you watch it the second time. Notes will help you track what you have noticed, and when you include timestamp in your notes, timestamps are vital for citing scenes from a film. Right? Now, what is timestamp? It's basically the time code which is given in your film, right? If you have, so right? You're already aware of. So when you are writing about a film, you have to say where that, you have to give the film, and then you will have to give the timestamp of that particular film. So this timestamp to this timestamp talks about this particular concept, right? So, or this particular thing which you are trying to focus on. So before talking any further, because of course I will now go on to the various approaches, right, of how to go about analyze a film. But before that, you need to brainstorm, right? This is what I was talking about, brainstorming ideas, and of course you'll have to research. Ideas is, again, when I say idea, I'm talking about the bigger question, right? And this is most important thing to do, as particularly in UG level or master's level. This is what you have to figure out. When somebody has asked you to analyze a film, what is the bigger question which the film addresses? Or if it's not addressing anything, it's not addressing anything. Say maybe a pot boiler is not trying to address anything. But if usually you have been asked to analyze a film, definitely the film has some value, the film has some context, the film is definitely addressing something. So what is it? And particularly as sociology students, if you're trying to connect the sociology of media, you're trying to use that framework, then the film is addressing a bigger question. And for that, you need to research and you need to brainstorm your ideas. Find what works, what bigger question is working and what is not working, right? So before we go on to different types of film analysis, I will just show you a trailer of the film Taxi Driver, 1976 trailer of Taxi Driver.
272. Second call, 401 Fort Hamilton, 417.
De Niro. In Bang the Drum Slowly, the critics called him a brilliant new talent. After Mean Streets, they said he was a genius. For his performance in The Godfather Part 2, they gave him the Academy Award.
Come on, man. Just get me out of here, all right?
Now, Robert De Niro creates a terrifying portrait of life on the edge of madness.
Cabby, just forget about this. It's nothing.
Taxi Driver, a film by Martin Scorsese.
Yeah,
man. People do anything in front of a taxi driver. I mean, anything. People too cheap to rent a hotel room.
Oh, driver, hurry up, will you?
People want to embarrass you. It's like you're not even there. It's like, you know, like a taxi driver doesn't even exist. This city here is like an open sewer, you know? It's full of filth and scum.
I think I know what you mean, Travis. But it's not going to be easy.
Yes, students. So the quiz is that you just saw a clip and you have to tell me what bigger question does the clip addresses. Does it address racism? Does it address gender? Does it address class conflict or sexuality? The answer is, of course, racism. Did you look at how the central character of this film, that is Travis Bickle, how he was looking at the men of the other racial colors, right? Or as a matter of fact, right, in the clip you saw that most of the people who were engaged in petty activities, right, were all black people, right? So, I mean, if you please watch the entire film, it's a wonderful film. And in this film, you know, it's via the look of the Travis how racism has been explained, right? Travis Bickle is a racist character, right? And he looks at and he looks at black people with a sort of that eye of disdain, that eye of hatred, and that itself brings out the racist characters in the film. I will not discuss it in detail because I know that in some other lecture the film Taxi Driver has been discussed at length. Now let's come to the different kind of film analysis. The question which usually comes up very often is that when you're talking about different kind of film analysis, which approach do you take? Do you take any one approach or do you take a combination of approaches? Depends on actually how long is your analysis is. Because whatever I'm talking about, it sometimes is also used in film review. Of course, we'll talk about film review separately. But in film analysis, whether you will choose one analysis, one approach, or whether you will use all these approaches is something which is up to you. But both are absolutely correct. Secondly, that you'll also have to figure out which approach actually befits which film. Like I was telling about, it's not necessary that all film will address any bigger question. You're talking about a potboiler film of, say, of course, you might connect, right? You can connect literally any piece of popular culture to something or the other. Right, but then again, it's up to you. So in some cases, if you don't want to do a cultural analysis, if you don't want to find out, how can you connect the film to, to other things, say suppose, then you can just limit yourself to per se a narrative analysis, the first kind of analysis which we are talking about. But again, it's your choice whether you analyze one thing or you analyze using one approach or multiple approaches. That's up to you. So what is narrative analysis? Narrative analysis is an examination, I'm reading a little bit, is an examination of the story elements, including narrative structure, character, plot. This type of analysis considers the entirety of the film and the story it seeks to tell. But dear students, this does not mean you simply narrate the plot of the film. That's not the idea behind a narrative analysis, because there's a word called analysis, where therefore you analyze the narrative. You analyze the storytelling of the film. Now you might say that, ma'am, as sociology students, we are not very confident about this kind of approach because we are not very, well versed with the idea of storytelling with regard to structure, with regard to character development and so on. And you're absolutely right. Right? So you need to do a little bit of reading on narrative per se. Of course, all of these ideas are very similar to literature as well. So in literature also per se, we study 3-act structure, how the piece of text, how that story, how that novel is divided into 3 acts per se. In cinema also, all of them gets applied in films as well. So in films as well, you divide the film in terms of Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, and so on. So there are plot, there's subplot, there's how there's a character arc, right? People from English genres, I'm sure, you can relate to the words which I'm talking about because it's all same. It's a film, it's a story. It's just a different medium, but it's a story. Right? So here, when you do a narrative analysis, you rather do not worry about the medium, but you talk about the story, right? And when it's story, it's actually same as literature, right? Maybe, of course, it's told in a different way, and we'll come to that in the second kind of analysis, but nonetheless, it's a story. So if you're doing a narrative analysis, then you basically talk about the structure which the plot follows. Of course, you tell what is the film, what is the plot, but other than that, you talk about the structure of the film. You have to talk about how the plot differ from the narrative, that is, how is the story told? Essentially, how is the story told, right? Is it told in present tense, past tense? How does the characters develop in the film? How the characters interact with each other? What is the role of these characters? You analyze all of this, right? And then you present your own argument. That's basically called a narrative analysis. The second kind of analysis is mise-en-scène analysis. Remember, in the beginning I was telling you that when you analyze a film, please just don't talk about how good is the editing, how good is the camera, right? All of that. So it's not just about the techniques, but this is where mise-en-scène comes in place, right? This is, in this kind of analysis, you actually talk about all that. But saying that, you know, the film had very good camera or the film had excellent sound is actually extremely lame, and you should never do that while writing about a film. What do you mean by it has a very good camera? Right? Every film should have very good camera. Every film uses a very good camera. You might say that the cameraman had an expertise over his work, but that's fine. I mean, that's should be true for literally every film. So here, instead of telling that camera edit, sound, very good, very nice, you talk about the mise-en-scène. Now, let's first begin by, because I'm using this term and I'm not telling you what is it. So what is mise-en-scène? And I'm again reading a little bit. A mise-en-scène analysis attends to how the filmmakers have arranged compositional element in a film, especially within a scene or even a single shot. So the term mise-en-scène is actually, students, related to theatre, right? So in a theatre also, and as it is in the film, all of these elements, and when I say elements, I talk about costumes, I talk about the placement of props in the stage or in the shot, I talk about the camera work, I talk about the use of sound, I talk about lighting, I talk about camera blocking, I talk about cinematography, you name it, all of these elements. And actually I have made a list for you so that you understand what elements I'm talking about. So location, color, sets, props, costume, hair and makeup, lighting, video, film, what is being used, camera choices, camera placement, frame rate, composition, framing, depth of field, sound design, music, performance, blocking, background action, post-production, all of these elements together tell the story. Remember, in the previous approach we were talking about that you describe the story. Now you describe how these elements help the filmmakers, or how these elements were used in order to tell the story which the filmmaker wanted to say. So the idea is not to say that, oh, wonderful camera work. You say that this is what the story or the clip, I mean, mise-en-scène, of course, not necessary that always you will be asked to analyze an entire film. Sometimes you will be asked to analyze one shot, one frame, or a 10 minutes of the film. So whatever it is, right? So when you're taking a mise-en-scène approach, you don't say it has wonderful composition, it has wonderful depth, and so on and so forth. You say that how, say, a particular camera mac aids to the kind of story the filmmaker wanted to say. Got my point? Right? So instead of saying that it was a good camera work, say why are you stating, or why this kind of camera work was befitting the kind of story the filmmaker was trying to say. So everything that appears before the camera and its arrangement, composition, sets, props, actors, costume, everything is mise-en-scène. And mise-en-scène analysis is when you talk about the use of these elements and how these elements aid to the telling of the story. Now, to make it a little more clear, we will watch first a clip of the film Psycho, and then first the trailer of the film Psycho, followed by a clip of the film Psycho. And in here, you don't have to, in the next quiz, after the clip, you don't have to tell me the bigger question, but, and neither I'm going into the narrative of the film, but yeah, we can talk a little bit about narrative of Psycho. So we'll talk about the narrative of the film, and what you will look at is things like lighting, it's things like placement of the props in the frame, right? Where is this man sitting? what is there in the background of the clip, right? And how all of this is helping in creating the horror which Psycho attempts to create.
Here we have a quiet little motel, when in fact it has now become known as the scene of the crime.
You have a vacancy?
Oh, we have 12 vacancies.
You know, this is the first place that looks like it's hiding from the world.
I think that we're all in our private traps, clamped in them. And none of us can ever get out.
Is anyone at home?
Oh, that must be my mother.
Is anything wrong?
Am I acting as if there's something wrong?
She's not missing so much as she's run away.
Put me down! Mother! Oh, God! Mother!
What are you running away from?
She looked like a wrong one to you?
It's not as if she were a maniac. She just goes a little mad sometimes.
Why, she wouldn't even harm a fly.
Hello students, the clip was interesting, isn't it? Now let's first talk about Psycho a little bit. Now the narrative of the Psycho. Now the narrative of the Psycho is indeed worth mentioning because the film, that is the director Alfred Hitchcock, starts the film on an entirely different note. Of course you have to watch the film in entirety to understand what I'm talking about. But here what Hitchcock starts with is a theft story. Right? The woman in the clip, she has actually stolen a lot of cash from the office and she's running away with that cash. And also she's interested in helping her boyfriend and so on and so forth. So it is completely, it appears like it's a thriller, right? Where somebody has run away with a lot of money and then people are going to find out and so on and so forth. But certainly this film completely changes its mood as well as its tone. When this woman, Marion Crane, right, where she lands up in a very deserted motel, and in that motel she meets a very unusual character called Norman Bates, who is actually, she finds out that he lives with his mother, and then the conversation starts, and he actually kills the character. So as you can understand, the story completely flips, the narrative completely flips from a thriller which is all about a bunch of money, cash which is stolen, to something very serious and heinous, such as a crime like murder, right? And everybody's looking for her, nobody knows where she's found, and the money becomes the most irrelevant thing in the rest of the narrative, because then the film is completely about this character's very interesting character, Norman Bates, who is the man in this film, and he lives, he has a multiple personality disorder, so he lives with his mother, but actually it's a split identity. It's a case of the split identity. So I don't want to reveal the entire narrative to you, but what I'm talking about is the flip of the narrative, right? So of course, when you write about Psycho, you will have to work on the narrative analysis of the film. You'll have to write about this. Secondly, if you're doing a mise-en-scène analysis, and here let's particularly talk about the clip which you saw, not the film in entirety, you look at the shot taking. Of course, there are various elements to speak about, but I'll speak about two. One is the shot taking. Every time Norman is being shot, he is shot from a low angle position. But every time Marion is shot, that is a woman is shot, she is shot from an eye level. You see the difference? Now, the reason being, every time you shoot somebody low angle, he or she, whoever it is you're shooting, comes across as a powerful character. Now, the idea of powerful was not there in in the film, because there are just two people who are talking in this film. We don't know yet that he's a killer and so on and so forth. But the shot taking itself gives the idea. Right? Now, it doesn't happen very consciously. You might say that, ma'am, it's not happening very consciously. But unconsciously, these devices, these elements of mise-en-scène, such as camera work, instill certain idea within you. So we spoke about camera. Look at this background and the setting, stuffed birds. Right? Now, the moment there are stuffed birds being used as props, it sets the tone of the clip as uncanny. Right? There is something uncanny about an hobby or about a setting which has stuffed birds all around, as a matter of fact. Right? So the props here also attributes or lends itself to the uncanniness of the situation. And that was the inherent idea of the filmmaker, to make the entire conversation, to make the entire interaction uncanny for the girl who appears in the film, and uncanny for us who are watching the film. On that note, students, I would come to the second and the third quiz, which I would like you to answer. So the second quiz is, I just mentioned some time back about the film Taxi Driver, and I want you to ask, who directed the film Taxi Driver? Was it Mrinal Sen? Was it Satyajit Ray? Was it Martin Scorsese? Or was it Quentin Tarantino? The answer to the question is, and I'm sure all of you could answer it very well, is the very famous Martin Scorsese. So Taxi Driver is a Scorsese's film. And in the next quiz, which I'm following one after the another, I wanted to ask you, who directed the film Psycho, which we also discussed, right? I did mention the name some time back. Was it Mrinal Sen? Was it Alfred Hitchcock? Was it Martin Scorsese? Or was it Raghu Rai? And the answer is, of course, Alfred Hitchcock. On that note, I will follow up with two more approaches in the forthcoming lecture.